one person is out there moving through the world and feeling like I was a part of inspiring them to live their best life, to live in alignment with their values, to live in alignment with their higher self, I feel like that's success.
You and I both know that success doesn't happen overnight. It takes vision, reflection, reinvention, struggle after struggle after struggle. It takes consistency. And it's the inner work that enables the outer work. And I think today I love to illuminate your inner journey for people, because I think it can help people so much, regardless of what industry they are in. And I'd love to start by having you paint a picture of your childhood in Tennessee, in your grandmother's kitchen, watching her pickle and preserve traditional foods. Because I think so much of your self-confidence and your identity, your values that you have brought along with you for so long were built there. So if we can start there.
Sure. I'd love to start by talking about my family's impact on who I am and how I show up in the world. But I want to go back to something that you mentioned, just, the reality that there is no overnight success. It's a protracted journey and it takes a lot of work. And I agree that I feel like all the work is the inner work. That's the work. But it's interesting because I just wanted to, my wife and I were talking about this other night about the way in which, I believe that social media does this really dirty little trick with a lot of younger people, because oftentimes we see people, I mean, we know that, the personas that we often see on social media are that just that they're these curated versions of ourselves. They don't necessarily show all the complexity of who we are. And with people who are often defined as successful, I think that, folks see the person kind of, at not the end of the journey, but the point in the journey where they're getting accolades or being compensated fairly for the work or being celebrated. And a lot of folks, and I think specifically young folks, just don't often understand the work that goes into building and sculpting and getting to the point where, many of us, whatever, both validated from the outside in terms of being successful, but more important, us feeling successful internally. And so
Yes.
it's something I've been thinking about a lot because I could go into that. I don't even want to, that's a digression that we could probably spend a whole episode
I've got another
discussing.
question coming up later, so we'll get back to that.
Sure. But in terms of my childhood is, I've been thinking about my childhood a lot. Full disclosure, I am grieving right now. A close cousin just passed away last week. And, you know, this has brought up something that I felt for decades now. And there's this sense of guilt that I often feel for not being in Memphis, where I was born and raised, and living in these other parts of the country away from most of my extended family. And most of my family, actually live in Memphis still. My parents don't. They moved to Alabama a couple decades ago, but most of my extended family's there. Many of them are doing well, and many of them are struggling. And I think there's this part of me that often feels like, wow, I'm out here being labeled a leader and doing this work that is aimed towards, you know, creating a better world. But then I think, well, should I be home trying to directly impact my own family? And I go back and forth. Van Jones, who has been a friend and mentor for a couple decades now, is also from Tennessee. And once I presented this tension that I feel and this guilt. And, he said that it's important for me to live and walk in my purpose and to be the biggest and brightest and most grounded leader that I can be. And then that work is, me being at home, kind of like with this noble idea of, being on the ground with the family may not allow me, and probably wouldn't allow me, to have as big of an impact as I've had with this national platform. And so I get that and I try to embrace that, but I still deal with these moments of feeling guilt and feeling like, the tragedies, the moments where people make mistakes, things have gone awry. There's this part of me that just feels like, well, if I was there, maybe I could have helped someone or saved someone or prevented them from making this mistake. My grandfather, my paternal grandfather, had practically an urban farm in his backyard. And,
Wow.
he had so much surplus that he gave it to my parents and their siblings. And then, you know, he would barter with people in the neighborhood. Because the interesting thing is, when I think about that neighborhood, you know, growing up, it was a very thriving local food scene.
Yeah.
And this was a working class Black neighborhood that my grandparents landed at when they moved from the rural South. And,
Mhm.
everyone in the neighborhood was active in some way in producing food, whether it's just like, someone growing tomatoes on their front porch, or fresh herbs in their windowsill, or tending their mini orchards, because pear trees, nectarine, peach trees abounded in that
Mhm.
neighborhood. Up to someone like my grandfather, who used every bit of available space to grow food. And one of the lessons that stands out the most when I think about things that I learned from my grandfather and the impact that he had on me was the importance of us creating abundance in our life so that we are
Yes.
overflowing and we can give from a place of abundance. I think that so often,
Yes.
whether it's emotional or even material things, um people live in lack. And
Yes.
I know there are complicated reasons why people might be living in lack,
Yes.
structural inequality,
Yes.
or just like mental
Mindset.
barriers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not really understanding the way in which we can shift our outer world by doing the inner work.
I'd love to talk about um, maybe perhaps the first big risk that you took in your life when you were in New York and you withdrew from your PhD program. And you probably were at a point there in your life that you were self reflecting, you were trying to stay very true to who you are. Because to me, and I've known you for a while, you stay true to who you are, but that's not easy.
Mhm.
So tell us a little bit about some of the struggles that you might have gone through when you got to New York and you experienced this different world, and how did you stay true to who you are and hone and pinpoint
Mhm.
your mission, your purpose? And you continue to pinpoint your purpose throughout your life, but that was probably one of the foundational starts to it.
I feel like I continually reinvent what my purpose is. And there have been some precedents where I've done that and seen that it's important to step back, reevaluate, um, be clear about if there need to be some tweaks to the trajectory. I want to, before I talk about the big move from leaving my PhD program in history and going to culinary school, I want to talk a little bit about what I often, when I'm ruminating on my early adult life, and the major decisions that I made. This is one of the major moments of bravery that I think really gave me an experiential understanding of the importance of putting ourselves in uncomfortable positions and how they help us grow, and how we have to go through that period of discomfort and disappointment and figuring
Yes.
things out. But that's where, what do they say? Like the pressure that creates diamonds.
Yeah.
And so when I graduated from high school, I had this romantic notion of going to my dad's alma mater, which was this historically
Xavier.
Black. No, so that was
Oh,
before
oh,
Xavier.
okay.
So
Okay.
It was this historically Black liberal arts college in Memphis where I grew up, Lemoyne. And so I, you know, had a full ride, had these ideas about I'm going to graduate from my dad's alma mater. And I went there and decided to stay with my parents because I was like, oh, why stay on campus? I could save money. And so there was a moment after my first year, and I was outside helping my dad with my dad was outside doing yard work, and I was inside, and I was just bawling. Like I was crying my eyes out because I felt so constrained and just felt like, being in this place that I grew up in, I just felt like it was the smallest place in the world and I needed to get out. Or it was like, so I went out to my dad, stopped him from mowing the lawn and said, Dad, I need to leave here or this place is going to kill me. And he looked at me in the eyes and he said, let's go, let's do it. And so that's when I applied to Xavier and transferred, which is in New Orleans. And, it was tough. I was like coming into this new school. I knew a few people who had gone there from my hometown, but it was a major reinvention of who I was. And that moment just demonstrated to me that, you have to just step out. You have to, oftentimes we don't know what the results are. Well, I would say that one of the biggest things was listening to my inner voice, because that was what was so
Yes.
persistent. This nagging inner voice, my intuition, my, infinite intelligence, my higher self, whatever you want to call it, was telling me that there was something so much bigger for me out in this world. And I needed to step out and put myself in a place of discomfort. And it was a similar situation with my decision to leave graduate school. I came to New York straight out of undergrad. I enrolled in this PhD program because that was just what I thought I was supposed to do. But there was a very limited way in which my parents defined success for my sister and me when we were growing up. And it was, doctor, lawyer, engineer. I don't even think professor was on there. And so, there was a lot of pressure for me. My sister was in medical school. I felt like, I just was a disappointment. I just felt this pressure to be on this track to becoming a professional. And so I thought that, getting a PhD in history and becoming a professor would be something that I could live with, but that my family would be proud of. And I had put a lot of emphasis on bringing them joy and making them happy and making them feel proud of me. But being in grad school, being in New York, recognizing that this is not where I was supposed to be. It wasn't time for me to be sitting in libraries for 8 hours a day. The city felt like my classroom, like a laboratory for in which I could explore and learn and grow. And so I appreciate the time that I spent in graduate school. Obviously, it taught me how to think, it taught me how to write in ways that I didn't imagine I would be able to. And it helped shift me on this trajectory of food justice activism because I learned about the work of the Black Panthers and their focus on food and health in grad school. And that's when I decided that that's the role that I wanted to play in this historical moment.
Yes. And of course, it's not just making your parents proud. The income was there. You had safety from potentially being a tenured professor later on in your life. So
maybe
a lot of people think about careers that way. If you go to med school for X amount of years, you're a doctor until you die. And that creates a lot of safety for so many people. And let's be honest, not everyone, most people do not have the income to be free-spirited entrepreneurs. It is incredibly challenging to do that. And that's why you see people in their 40s and 50s finally getting a chance to be and do what is true to themselves.
Yes.
And you were able to do that at a young age. And we'll talk just a bit about NGI. We both know it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on how that also helped continually hone your purpose and your sense of self. What did you learn and get out of your years at the Natural Gourmet Institute?
Well, I'll say one of the first lessons I learned is that we need to be true to our vision, even when other people don't see it. Um,
Yes.
I'm an Aquarius, and so, the fact that I'm an Aquarius, I'd feel this way if I weren't, but Aquarians are some of the most awesome people out there doing things. But,
Sounds good to me.
one of the things is we're visionaries. We are always on the cutting edge. We're always thinking ahead. We see what's going to be,
Yes.
the zeitgeist, if you will. That's just a gift that we have. And I was very clear about the role that I wanted to play as a food justice leader, as someone helping to um, empower people in historically marginalized communities to take the lead in, dissolving the physical, the economic, the geographic barriers that they have to accessing healthy, fresh, and affordable food. So I was clear about that, but this was a moment where kind of what we see as the modern food justice movement, it was just picking up steam. And most of the people coming to culinary school, or at least the natural gourmet in my class, they were thinking about being restaurant chefs or caterers or I don't know. I feel like those are the major things that people were there
Starting
for.
food companies. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe starting some type of creating some value added product or something. But I remember the first day, and they asked everyone to talk about why they were there and what their goal was, and I went on this whole spiel about I wanted to create this organization, be healthy, that use cooking as a way to empower and engage young people so that they could be the leaders and food justice, blah blah blah. And I remember this woman laughing. One of my classmates literally laughed out loud. And, you know, I'm laughing now, but I guess the point is that it just felt weird, and it felt unsupportive, and
Mm,
it created a little bit of insecurity for a second, just for a
yeah.
second, like, wow, like, okay, yeah, like, what's going on? Is this something? Is this a thing? I'm just kind
Yes.
of like making something up as I go along, because that's what it felt like when I first started doing the work.
Yes.
But it was just that moment, and I was kind of tongue in cheek about the whole, like, I'm laughing now, but in all seriousness, like, I see the results of staying in the course. And there have been moments throughout my career where people didn't get it, people
Yeah.
didn't see the vision. We could talk
Yeah.
about shopping my book, Vegan Soul Kitchen,
Oh, yeah. We're going to
it
get to
was,
that.
oh,
Yep.
yeah. So anyway,
Yep.
I think that was an important lesson for me. The other lesson was connecting with people outside of just the classroom. And I think
Mm,
you might know that Anne Marie Colbin, the founder of the Natural Gourmet, and I became friends, and she was an
yes.
important mentor. And I feel like we spent more time after I graduated because
Yeah.
she's a founder.
Yep.
She gets everything that I was hoping to do. She had gone through it in different ways, being a visionary and a founder. And so
Yes.
I really felt it was important that I reach out to her for mentorship. And she was so amazing. And one of the things that I loved about our relationship, Pooja, is that she gave me a lot of advice around, like, nuts and bolts career things, and making sure that taxes are in order, and getting an attorney and all those things that are important when you're founding a project or company or business. But I love the fact that she and I had this relationship where we can talk openly about, like, spirituality. We could talk
Wow.
about, like, doing the inner work. I remember at
Yeah.
the time I had I was single, but I wanted to be in a relationship. And we spent one of our lunches going over the way in which this was Anne Marie telling me how I needed to set up my apartment to create the best feng shui that
Now
would then facilitate
this
me
is
getting
some
a
news.
partner.
This is news. That's
So,
great. Wow.
yeah. So,
Wow.
just like relationships are important, relationships are everything.
In 2006, you wrote that first book, Grub, with Anna LaPay. It wasn't until 2014 that Afrovegan came out. And that really made a splash in the publishing world, really propelled you forward and your career forward. But I don't want to talk about Afrovegan. I want to talk about those years in between.
Mm,
Those must have been some very tough years. And as authors, the grueling nature, the isolating nature of working on growing your platform through books, it's it's real, and it is incredibly hard from a mental perspective
Mhm.
to keep your contentment and happiness in the future, as opposed to being obsessed with what you want to become, what you want to have out there. This idea between process over outcome is something that so many of us deal with. Also, of course, during that time, just staying true to who you are and staying your path while things might not be going the way you want,
Mm.
while you're not feeling validated for all the work you are doing. What was going on in your mind, and how did you get through those years? You did write two books, but they didn't make that kind of splash until Afrovegan.
Mhm.
Am I right about this?
You
In
are. Yeah. I think I should start with 2020, because in order for me to talk about or put the challenges of that period in between writing Grub and Afrovegan in perspective, I really need to focus on how I was getting in my own way. And part of that is that many of the practices that have sustained me, that have, I would argue, helped me manifest so much of, what has come to fruition in my life. Um, there have been moments where I've abandoned those practices. And it's just like the stress of life, me feeling like I need to force things instead of
Yeah.
letting things be in flow.
Yes.
Those are the things that I think I can, like, in hindsight, see, like, so many times those things, if I would have had a better grasp on, being grounded and maintaining those practices, that period could have been a lot easier for me. And last year, during the pandemic, I had a major reinvention
Wow.
internally, personally, which I think led to, not I think, which definitely led to a transformation of how our whole family operates.
Wow.
And, last year, I really recommitted to so many of the daily practices that I keep saying, I committed to the daily practices that help me be the most powerful person I can be. And one, which, I've always kind of, I've really appreciated the power that you have demonstrated in terms of focusing on physical activity, because I think, like, focusing on the body can be a really powerful doorway
Yes.
into the inner work. And I'll say that one of the things that was so consistent, it was important for my survival, working out every day. Like,
Yeah.
6 times a week, I was doing like 45 minutes of like high intensity PX 90 type stuff. Um, because I just like being here, kids were sheltering in place, doing distance learning. My wife was here. I needed that. But what that did was that started to open me up to the a deeper inner path. And so,
Wow.
getting back to reading a lot of the teachers that have um just been an important part of my journey, from, I don't know, Neville Goddard to Napoleon Hill to Florence Scovel Shinn to um Ernest Holmes, like these new thought metaphysical teachers that early on, I would say, in college and in grad school, really helped me get a grasp on the power that we have to shape our life by doing that inner work. And
Yes.
so that period, I'm young, I have all these ambitions. I'm not really clear about how to play this game. I'm kind of figuring things out as I go along.
Yes.
Um, Facing disappointment. One of the important lessons that I've learned, and learned it early on, is that success isn't linear.
Yes.
Oftentimes, I'm
Most
thinking,
of the
hey,
time. Yeah.
most of the time, right? I'm like, we got Grub, Anna and I got this book, we got this crazy advance, much more than we should have.
Wow.
So I'm just like, oh,
Wow.
things are just gonna keep kind of moving up from here. But then we shop Vegan Soul Kitchen around. 10 editors rejected. One says they want me to do a book, but not the book that I want to write. And then one got the vision. And my advance was significantly smaller. So,
Right.
you know,
Wow.
I just I really had to get comfortable with one success not looking or unfolding in the way that I
Yes.
imagine it. Like,
Yes.
okay, this is like, of course I'm gonna be continued, like things are gonna continue to just like
Yes.
go upward and they're not gonna be
Yes.
any like setbacks. And that's just not how things work.
Yes.
Because
Yes. What
that
were some of the things you were talking about that you are incorporating in your day? Those
oh
so we talked about one of them,
yeah,
working out. What are some of the other things that you
sure.
mentioned could have
Mhm.
helped you get through that?
Yeah. So working out, and I had to get, because I was largely just doing like solo workouts for 45 minutes alone for over a year. And I recently started CrossFit, and it's been amazing just being around
Wow.
other
Wow,
people,
Bryant.
being in a community of folks working out,
Yeah.
bringing weight training into it. So
Yeah.
I wanted to mention that because I feel like
Yes.
that's just taken everything to the next level. And a big part of
Wow.
it is because I'm putting myself, telling my wife the other night, I'm intentionally putting myself in this place of discomfort. I'm goofy
Yes.
out there. Like I'm like snatch, power
Yeah.
lift, like clean. I'm like falling all over the place. And
Yeah.
I'm not embarrassed. I don't care. I'm very
Yeah.
comfortable with being in
Yeah.
that position. Just kind of quickly digressing to talk about the body of work. I used to be
Yeah.
ashamed of all my books. Vegan Soul, whenever I would write the next one. Oh, I'm working
Wow.
on Vegan Soul Kitchen. Grub. Oh my God, I hate that book. I started working on it in Inspired Vegan. Oh, Vegan Soul Kitchen. That book is horrible. Afrovegan. But I got over that because I had to get comfortable with the fact that I'm just practicing in public. Yeah,
Ah,
those books
yep.
do suck because I've worked on a new one. My craft is improved. I've gotten better, faster, smarter. So of course, in my mind, it sucks, but I wouldn't be at this point if I didn't do that. So practicing in public and being goofy and corny and messing up at CrossFit I love it. That's my favorite song. I'm eating it
Yeah.
up all day.
I love it.
Um, other
And back
practices,
to
yeah.
yes, go ahead. Just
So,
a
oh, sorry.
little uh kind of interjection here. It's that ego again. Oftentimes so many of us take our own self so seriously. Too
Yes,
seriously.
too seriously, definitely.
We're it's not about us. And I hear that coming out so much with you, Brian, especially, now in talking about the CrossFit. Who cares what I look like?
Mm-hmm.
Who cares about my book? Who
Yeah,
cares? Who
yeah,
who cares?
right, exactly. I try to sit in
And
that
that's
place.
part of that freedom, right?
Mhm. Um, when I wake up, this has been really important because this used to trip me up so often. I avoid looking at my device, my phone at all costs as soon as I wake up. And that used to be a habit that I had. Oh, let me look at my Twitter. Let me look at my Instagram. That period when I first wake up in the morning is sacred to me. And I see
Yeah.
the energy that I'm cultivating during that first half hour, 45 minutes, hour is setting the tone for the rest of my day. And so forget a device, forget about any outside energies or ideas or something that's going to like impact my internal life.
Yes.
I need to have agency and be very directed in how that looks. And what that looks like is just like sitting and even just like 10 minutes. I try to do like 5 minute, 10-minute meditation that like I can tell when I don't meditate. Just like thinking
Right.
about how my day unfolded and like the challenges. If I meditate it looks totally different than it
Yeah.
does if I don't meditate. So I do that. I have this affirmations. I listen to these affirmations, this 10-minute affirmations of how I think it's like 50 affirmations for the most powerful 50 affirmations for success.
Mm,
And they're awesome because they do kind of vacillate between like personal stuff but also professional and the confluence of the
I
two.
love it. We'll put in the show notes,
Oh yeah,
Brian, so
please
other people
do.
can
It's a YouTube video that I watch, and this thing is amazing.
fantastic.
Um, when I do my work at home, there's this guy up in Toronto, Joseph Rodriguez. So if I'm working out at home and I have like my speaker on or whatever playing as I'm working out, I listen to his videos because he does a lot of work around just like internal life, metaphysics, personal development. And I love his reflections on the power of positive thinking, manifesting, kind of editing, revising throughout the day, when we are moving through the world, and the power that we have to direct our life. So those are my practices, drinking water, eating
Yeah.
healthfully,
Yeah.
um, positive
Yeah.
mental attitude. I would say PMA, positive mental attitude, is the overarching theme that I feel like is the way that I try to move through the world.
Yeah.
So.
I love it. And two things come to mind. When we're looking at our devices, it's usually not positive, right? It's the world asking of us,
Mm.
and taking from us first thing when we're in our morning. So as I
Ooh,
hear
that's
you,
profound. Taking
right?
from us. That's
Right,
deep.
taking, right?
Yeah.
So you are in a position where you are yourself and you are not being affected by anybody wanting from you.
Hmm.
And the other thing that comes to mind is stillness, silence. That is kind of a thread that I hear from you through this whole conversation is the stillness that's required to stay true to ourselves. And a lot of people do find meditation hard. You know, until just very recently, I found a certain type of way to meditate that actually works for me, but most people don't really like it.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to CrossFit, that's stillness. You are actually your brain, if you think about where your thoughts are, they're not anywhere except you're clean in your snatch.
Right?
You're
Totally.
right in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is creating so much stillness for you and presence. That's your silence. It's so beautiful.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I didn't
So
even think
all of
about it
this,
like that.
right,
Yeah.
is creating silence and stillness in your life, whether it's from not looking at your phone or it's going to CrossFit or it's listening to Rodriguez. All of
Mm,
it is in the present moment.
mm. This stillness, this finding shutting everything out so that
Yes.
we can continue to kind of recalibrate, readjust the path, the trajectory. So when I left graduate school and then started working for a year before I went to culinary school, I was clear when I applied to culinary school that I did not want to take loans out. I was like, I'm not taking out any educational loans, especially with the precariousness of, it's like you're not guaranteed to come out of a
Oh,
culinary
no.
school making a lot of money, or especially, what I was doing, starting this NGO. And so
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not taking any loans out. So I was working full time. I was going to the Natural Gourmet part time. And then my
Mm,
girlfriend at the time moved in with me just to help me kind of like cut down on
wow.
costs and support
Wow.
me in this goal of mine. And it was fine until winter. And as you can imagine, two people living in a studio apartment in Brooklyn during the winter where you can't be outside going to like Prospect Park or something can be intense. And I decided that I needed to create some type of space for me to be out the house on a regular basis. And I had also had a desire to deepen or just really dive into a yoga practice. I had taken some
Mm,
classes, but there was this yoga ashram in Manhattan, and they had a teacher's training, or not teacher's training, but it was like a kind of immersive beginning yoga program. So I did that, and that provided me with like an hour and a half, 2 hours of that quiet that you were talking about
wow.
several times per week. And I
Wow.
felt like I don't know why I keep saying this. When I was doing my yoga practice, when I was, being dedicated to my meditation, things came to me. Like
Wow.
a lot of the journey, a lot
Wow.
of the kind of like be healthy and, the potential of writing books, having this major impact, that information was flowing to me when I was engaged in those practices. And that
Wow.
was that early moment I think I was telling you about, where I was just like, yeah, this is the power. But then, you get into the stress of living and working and family.
Yeah.
And that's when I kind of abandoned those. But that early period was my experience of how when you shut things out and you're quiet, you don't have to do a lot of the work. The work, the energy just flows through you. So
Afrovegan was the first book where you put Blackness in the main title. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder during that period, did you feel the publishing industry wasn't really getting you in a sense? And also, you likely knew, we all knew, that there was an underrepresentation of what you wanted to put out in the world in the publishing industry. But people weren't seeing that, and people weren't, in a sense, hearing you as you were trying to continually push this into the world. Was that the impetus for you naming the book Afrovegan, or anything else around that topic of creating space for Blackness in food publishing?
So I don't think that the publishing industry got me and the vision that I had and the mission that I was putting in place. The people got me. And
Okay.
having grown up
Yeah.
in these very, just robust and
Yes.
abundant Black communities, I knew that there was, as much as we like to imagine veganism, vegetarianism, plant-based eating as these practices of upper middle class white
Yes.
suburbanites, or gentrifiers in urban centers, these are practices that people of color, as you know, around the world for a long time have incorporated so many of these practices. But let's just talk about, the thread throughout the 20th century of Black led food and health activism. I experienced it. My first contact with ideas around veganism came from Black Seventh-day Adventists in our
Wow.
family who, had theological reasons that they were embracing that diet. But from them to the Nation of Islam, to Rastafarianism, to the comedian and social justice activist Dick Gregory. So many of my ideas around these practices came from Black people. And going to Atlanta or Chicago and seeing like the Soul Veg, like these vegetarian Black run restaurants.
Wow.
So it's kind of like, so many things in the Black community. You talk about like the quote unquote Chitlin circuit, where you have these Black performers who are superstars. They're A-listers in the Black community, and people in the wider culture might not know who they are, but they're huge. And I knew that there was an audience for Vegan Soul Kitchen and Afrovegan, and my new book Black Food. And now, so let me tell you why I know that the publishing industry didn't get me. One, because there were so few people who saw the vision of Vegan Soul Kitchen. The response that we got so often was, well, you're cutting the pie too thinly. I mean, people thought it was ridiculous just even having those two words next to each other. Vegans, soul food, like, aren't those oxymoronic? Do Black people even eat vegetables? Those were the level of ridiculousness that I would hear from these people. But going back to something we talked about earlier, as a creative, as someone on the ground, as someone who comes from this culture and have lived experience, I know what not just the zeitgeist of the moment is, right? Because as you know, when you sign a contract for writing a book, you sign a contract, the book may take 2 years before it even is published, right?
Yes.
And so the people like us, the creatives on the ground who are doing the work with our ear to the ground and connecting with people in community, we know what the zeitgeist of the moment is. We know what the zeitgeist in a couple of years is going to be, and maybe even a decade now. Now, the fastest growing population of vegans in the United States are Black folks. I knew this. I saw this coming a long time ago. And this industry that is run by most often the people who have a lot of the power in these houses are the ones who control the money, because they're looking at the bottom line. They're looking at how many followers you have. They're looking at the potential of how much it's going to sell. And even if you have an enthusiastic editor that gets the vision, oftentimes the people who are the money handlers can be the ones that will get in the way of a project being birthed into the world. And so I just want to encourage people to really just like be true to, like, when you hear that inner voice, when you have an idea, even if the rest of the world doesn't get it, block them out, like stay focused, follow your passion. And believe in the vision that you've seen in your mind, because if you see
Yes.
it in your mind, you can manifest it. It's just about
Yes.
creating the energy and drawing the resources and the people and the ideas to further help you to get to
Yes.
the goal.
Yes. There's a 19th century American poet and essayist, Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Hmm.
He was a contemporary of Abraham Lincoln. And he said so much around this idea of self reliance, of being true to your independent thought. And that was in the late 1800s. And now with social media and all the other noise that we have, a lot of noise, it's harder than ever to not be the follower. And I love that advice that you're giving in it. It it's a good segue to talking about how you are now a publisher
Hmm.
of Four Color Books. So now you are not in that talent role as much as you are in the ownership role.
Hmm.
How does that look and feel to you, this new position?
Yeah. I want to say that one of the lessons I learned in terms of us pitching this idea to the big wigs at Penguin Random House and getting the imprint is that we have to get out of our way. Sometimes we can put these unnecessary barriers, hurdles in the way of our success. My mom talks about blocking your blessings. And I remember this,
Love that.
having an imprint was a vision that I've had for a while. My agent and I have talked about it, but I've always, thought that I had to have whatever metrics I put in place. Like, oh, I need to have this many followers, or having sold
Yes.
this many books, or having put in whatever I felt like defined success, where I was worthy of getting an imprint if I asked for it. And there was such a sense of urgency in 2020 with the revelation of a lot of the food media having these kind of white supremacist practices. And
And
um,
Black Lives Matter. And
well, yeah, I mean, well,
yeah,
starting with,
yeah,
the uprisings and the movement that came after Breonna Taylor and
George Floyd.
George Floyd's murder, that, and then just like all the revelations of racism within food media. And I was like, no, the time is now. Like, first of all, I knew that there was a window that was open because so many of these institutions have been embarrassed, and we know that that window or that door will open, but then it closes. And so I felt like we
Right.
had to like seize the moment, but also just I could sit around and complain all day. I could talk about like what these people need to do better, or I can model. And I
Yes.
knew that having my own imprint would allow us to model a different way of moving, within the publishing world. Model um like real diversity and inclusion. I hate those terms, but I'm
Yes.
just going to use it for like the real
If
diversity and
nothing
inclusion,
else. Yeah.
and not just like performance and like these band-aid solutions. And that's what we're doing. We're really um doing the work, but also creating these systems so that other institutions, other publishing companies or imprints, we can share resources, and we could document best practices and things that have worked, so that if other people want to incorporate them, then there'll be a blueprint.
I love it. Bryant, thank you. Thank you for doing that. That is a really, it's a huge sea change in a very, very, very traditional industry. Tell me a little bit about how you define success. Listening to you, I've come to realize you've done a lot of inner work. You're constantly thinking, and that means your definition of success is evolving constantly. After your first book, you had one definition. After Afrovegan, you probably had another. After your two beautiful children, you probably have another. And that continually updates with you as you
Mhm.
update in your life. What is it now to you?
I'm going to give you two answers. The first one is my definition of success, and I mean this sincerely. If I can positively impact one person, I feel like I've done a great job. Um, Melvin Van Peebles, the polymath, the filmmaker, the musician, spoken word artist,
Yes.
author, the brilliant person that he is, passed away, I think yesterday or the day before. He recently passed, and he was a major inspiration. His body of work has inspired me in so many ways. So I think about like Melvin Van Peebles, KRS-One, who wrote the song Beef that had such an impact
Yes.
on me. Just, Upton Sinclair, the author of The
The
Jungle,
jungle.
which had a major impact on me. I think about these individuals and their work, their vision, their mission, them, the way that they lived in the world. They impacted me to then go on and do all this stuff that I've done. And if I can do that for one person, I'm like, just as a testament, like, oh wow, like look at the impact they had on me. If one person is out there moving through the world and feeling like I was a part of inspiring them to live their best life, to live in alignment with their values, to live in alignment with their higher self, I feel like that's success. And I know there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of people that I've impacted positively. So I not to be cliche or cute, but I really sincerely feel that way. Like I could stop doing all this now and go and just like live in a cabin in the middle of the woods like Emerson, and I'd be happy. Um, but
I love it.
you know, I think in terms of the way in which that continues to look as the year goes by, success is me never resting on my laurels and just being comfortable. I could have easily just written out the rest of my life as an author and just, continue writing books. But I know that there's a bigger need. I know that there is a vacuum for people who actually have more power to impact the field of publishing and supporting budding authors and helping other people to build their, excuse the colonialist language, their empires, and able to do whatever they want to do. And so I'm gonna keep pushing it to the next level. I mean, I'm already thinking about you know our 60s. I told my wife that this is
Yes.
going to be my major project that I'm working on throughout our 50s. I want to build this publishing company. I want to create something that's lasting, that's sustainable, that has a powerful impact on the world. And then for our 60s, I told her I want to move up to Napa with our family's property up there. And I want us to, create like our own art studios in the barn that we have and have like a kiln for like making ceramics and painting. And I want to be making art with my wife. That's what I want to be doing then. And so that's going to be a major challenge. And like I'm not just like I want to be making art. I want to be making art that's in galleries around the world, that is being written about in art journals, that's having like a really powerful impact. So I'm just gonna
I
keep
can't
pushing
I can't wait to replay this
it.
when we're 60.
So
Let's have some fun for a bit. Tell me everything about this beautiful book, Bryant. And when I look at this book on the internet, because I don't have it with me, yes, I can't wait to see it. It's beautiful. You know what that book reminds me of is you, everything about you. It's visually appealing. It's brings out that art of us as artists want to bring out, but we don't have that creative freedom as authors. We just don't.
mhm,
So I love to see that. And then of course, weaving the history, because you've always loved history,
mhm.
and then community of bringing in all these different authors. And then of course, the nourishing food. It's all in this one book. Tell
Yeah.
us about it. I love
Well,
it.
first of all, I'm so glad that you said that. You see me, you get it.
Yeah.
And when George McCalman, the designer of the book, and also the cover, he said he wanted to create a cover that evoked who I am. And so kind of
Wow.
bringing it together, like, my love of and kind of having grown up in hip hop culture, but also my appreciation of jazz. And that was like the energy that he brought to the cover. And I think he did it so brilliantly. I agree. And just visually with the cover, in terms of like modeling, like how many cookbooks coming out of the United States
Can you
don't
hold it
have
up
like,
just a little bit
oh yeah,
higher?
yeah.
So yeah, beautiful.
you know, so many of the cookbooks we see now, I feel like it looks like the same cover. It's just like the author at a
Yes.
counter with
So
a
true.
food shot, and I feel
Yeah.
like this is a bold
Marble
statement.
counter.
Yeah, you know, the typical rodeo, but I think it's a bold statement to have this as a cookbook cover,
Yeah.
because at its core, it's a cookbook. It's cookbook plus, but recipes are the through line. And this is the first book that For Color, my publishing imprint, is putting out, our flagship publication. So we had to bring the heat.
Bring
We
the
couldn't
power.
half step in any way. And
Yes.
so um this book is a collective effort. I think it's important for me to always recognize that I was a leader. And, you know, in terms of my teachers, people have inspired me. Napoleon Hill, the author of Think and Grow Rich,
Yes.
you know, he writes a lot and talks about the importance of being a good leader. And he uses Andrew Carnegie as an example, and, you know, how he didn't, you know, he didn't know everything. He wasn't a metallurgist. He, you know, didn't know much about railroads. So he knew how to build teams. He knew how to bring in competent people to execute his vision. And that was the powerful thing about this project. I had this vision, and I knew what art director I wanted to work with, what photographer, what food stylist, what prop stylist. I knew that I didn't know everything. And so one of the first things I did was I created what I call the kitchen cabinet, which are three colleagues who are brilliant experts in the field of food, to help me fill in the gaps. I don't know everyone around the world. There are people I wanted to meet in parts of Africa and the Caribbean, and I didn't know them. And so they were the, you know, kind of filled in the gaps and helped me, you know, think about, you know, the structure of the book and just what I really wanted to get at. So, and Jenny Wapner, one of the most respected editors in the publishing world, just happened to be between jobs, and she was my
Wow.
project manager. And this book
Wow.
could not have happened without her brilliance, her publishing expertise,
Wow.
and her willingness just to do, like, you know, the grunt work. It wasn't like she was above contacting every contributor to make sure that they got paid, or just, you know, all
Right.
those things. So I would say one of the most powerful lessons I learned is that surround yourself with competent people, inspire them, create community and rapport, you know, among the group, and then people are gonna bring their A game. It's gonna create, you know, a beautiful outcome. And one of the
Yes.
things that we did, we going back to what you said earlier, when George and I were conceiving of how we wanted to bring everything together, we were very clear that process was just as important as outcome. And so, you know, everything from literally meeting weekly for months leading up to the photo shoot, so that we can just drill down in a vision and, you know, really, you know, get the props and the different lighting and the food and all that stuff. That just created this like community and love and chemistry among our whole team that I think, you know, you see it, you feel it, like you get it as soon as you pick that up, because we knew that we had to do that because this book was too important not to.
Everything you've said is beautiful, Brian, and it reminds me of what we touched on earlier, is when you are so wedded to a higher purpose, the process becomes content, and it becomes a flow, and it
Mhm.
becomes ease in a way, and that's when the best work happens. And it also helps you to gather people who have that same kind of goal. You are inspiring the right people around you because they see how wedded you are to your purpose and to your true self.
Mhm.
And so when people tap into that, others can see it, and that's when you build what Napoleon Hill is talking about, this you are the leader, but others are there with you to create wonder. So
Yes.
so beautiful. How can so the book drops
So the book will be
October.
published October 19th,
Okay,
Tuesday, October 19th. Um,
fantastic. What
pre-
can people do to advance your work, this book, and also connect with you if they have ideas and they want to be part of what you're building in this new imprint?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I'm most active on Instagram, and you can my handle is at Bryant, Bryant, then Terry, Terry. So at Bryant Terry. We're receiving proposals and inquiries from literary agents and authors weekly. If you have a idea for a book project that you think the world needs to see, please run it by us. And to be clear, we are um, you know, cookbooks, food related books is my wheelhouse. So as we're building our list in the beginning, we'll be starting with those type of books. We'll be publishing a few books per year as we're building our foundation. And as we get stronger, we will increase the number of books we're publishing, and we're going to expand into all the areas that I'm interested in, from art to poetry to self-help to prescriptive nonfiction, whatever it is. We've acquired 3 books already. 2 of them are cookbooks, but one of them is actually an art book. So really excited about the expanding vision for color.
For more on how to find calm and freedom in a fast-paced world, hit the subscribe button below. And please share this wisdom with someone you love.